Good morning and welcome to this stream, which is about taking on an apprentice worth considering. I'm going to hand over straight to Karen Hedger at AIM, who's going to run you through another fascinating session.
Thank you very much, Rick. I hope it will be fascinating and useful and above all practical. That's the absolute importance of this session and the relevance of this session. And I was just saying to colleagues when we're in the green room, which was very exciting, marvellous coffee and wine and all sorts in the green. I can't tell you what was there. But we were saying actually it's really a good segue really from the last session where we were talking about hesitancy of some people to go to university and what the implications of COVID might be on university, and how apprenticeships might be an alternative and an increasingly important route for talent to come into our industry. As Rick said, I'm Karen Hedger. I'm the business lead at AIM Qualifications and Assessment Group. I'm really delighted to be on the educational advisory panel for BGI. And we've been working around games industry with qualifications and apprenticeships for some time now. Last year we introduced the concept of apprenticeships. It was still fairly nascent. A year on, things have moved on considerably. Before we go too much further, we've got a bit of a poll for you, really just to find out for ourselves a bit of background to how much you actually know about apprentices. So here are the questions which pop up as if by magic. In two different categories really, if you are in industry and if you're an employer, to what extent are you already involved with apprenticeships? Are you embracing them and see them as an important element in growing new talent? Are you considering the extent to which taking on an apprentice could add value to the company? Or you don't really understand how apprenticeships work? And please, if you don't, do say so, because it's an unwieldy, complex and growing phenomenon. So great to know what you don't know, and then we can provide information to help you learn about them. And if you are from HE, FE, training provider, to what extent are you working with apprenticeships? You already work with employers to support the delivery of them. You only offer degrees or FE qualifications, or again, you don't really understand how apprenticeships work. So great if you could please answer those questions as we go through, and then as we did before, we can come back and have a look at those answers at the beginning. We'll also use them, because we'll have contact details, we'll also use them to send information following the conference as well, which we think might be useful. Would urge you to also, as we go through the session, to pop any questions into the Discord channel. And if we don't have a chance to answer those as we go through, then we can follow them up. So please do leave your email addresses. One of the great things about any event like this is the networking. It's a little bit more difficult, obviously, like this, but let's not lose opportunity. So if anyone wants to share, ask, request information, do please just drop us your email address in the Discord box. So I want to introduce you to our panel of very distinguished people from industry and education, and really great that we've managed to actually get people here together from education and industry, and teams of people. I want to let them tell you a bit about themselves. I think that's probably more appropriate. Because they'll be able to tell you what they're doing as part of their introductions. Before we do that, just a bit of background about apprenticeships, and to confirm what you probably already know, that employer is required to pay at least the national minimum wage if you take on an apprentice of £4.15 an hour, which is not huge, and to make a contribution to required cost of the training. So 80% of the apprentice's time is spent on the job, 20% of their time is required of off-the-job learning to be presented by a training provider. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works in a minute. If your company is a levy payer, you will probably already know about it. But if you're an SME, you need only pay 5% of that contribution towards the training fund. Every standard has a minimum funding band or maximum funding band. We're going to be talking about a couple of standards this morning: Digital Community Manager, which has a funding band of 13,000, and Software Developer, which has a funding band of 18,000. So you've got an idea of the cost of this training. Both the standards we're going to be talking about have 2-year provision for training. What you must have, and our colleagues in it will tell you about that, is at least a minimum of a year's training. So it gives you an idea of what the funding is like. But as I say, come back to us about all of that if you want more information. Interestingly, and why this is a particularly good time perhaps to take on an apprentice, from now until 2021, businesses can receive an extra £2,000 for every 16 to 24-year-old apprentice they take on. This is a result of COVID, and £1,500 for an apprentice over 25. So there is money, and the government has recognised that there are particular additional issues now because of COVID, and there is some extra funding available. So, panel, enough for me. That's enough for me. I'm really pleased to welcome 2 industry employers: Mark Evans, owner of Hollywood Gaming, and Alex Eichinger from Ubisoft, who you probably heard of Ubisoft. Might not have heard of Hollywood Gaming, but Mark is going to tell you what an amazing company they are. And they're training providers, so I said they're working with them. So we have James Ellis from Creative Alliance, who are a brilliant creative industries apprenticeship and training company in Birmingham, who are working with Mark at Hollywood Gaming. And we have Alistair Irons from University of Sunderland, who's been working with Alex and his team at Ubisoft. So it's great. The mix we have are private training provider, an HE, and a SME, and a huge company. So what better than that? The perfect addition, of course, is Marcia, Deakin, who many of you will know from NextGen Skills Academy, and a good friend of AIM Assessment, certainly, and BGI, and NextGen are a great organisation right in the middle of education industry, and Marcia has a wealth of games industry background and education, and they've been doing lots to help everything come together. And with one of the standards particularly, have acted as secretariat to the Institute for Apprenticeships and Education. And Marcia doesn't actually have grey hair yet, but if she did another one, she might have. So let's start. The reason I'm here really, in terms of the role of AIM Assessment, is that apprenticeships are now assessed right at the end, and we are the endpoint assessment organisation for Digital Community Manager. So Mark and Alex, great to hear from you about what's inspired you to take on apprenticeships in your companies, and how you think it'll benefit your business. But do tell us a bit about your companies first. Mark, should we start with Mark?
Thanks, Karen. Yes, Hollywood Gaming, as you said, we're an SME. We've grown out of the arcade industry, where we've been for the last 15 years. So our software is not front-end games design for a lot of it. We do a lot of back-end work as well, so sort of integrating games into arcade cabinets. So lots of fun with steering wheels and gun actuators and pedals and all that kind of sort of mechanical stuff. So yeah, that's us. And from an apprenticeship point of view, we've had 3 apprentices so far. We've had great experiences with all of them. And I think for us as an SME, apprentices are great because we can mould them across many disciplines that we have in games and games design for the arcade industry in particular, which I think sits across a lot of disciplines, rather than a lot of the sort of current university-led degree courses and graduate courses that tend to focus a lot on sort of specific games design, games programming skills. So yeah, and our apprentices have sat across both software and the creative side from a design side. So we found them absolutely invaluable for our business, both to bring some sort of cost-effective skills in for us at the beginning, but then also to be able to mould those apprentices into a great resource for the business and hopefully provide a great grounding for their career going onwards.
I think that's a really important point, isn't it? It's about growing your own talent, and that point that you make about moulding them as to how you want them for your company. I think that's a really key point.
Yes, indeed, and particularly. Sorry, carry on.
No, you carry on.
Okay, I was going to say, particularly in sort of the area of the games industry that we are in arcade, there are a lot of skills that are probably not at the forefront of people's minds. So for us, it's not all kind of Unity and front-end graphics programming. We still have a lot of sort of dark ages codes coming back from sort of the 90s, interfacing to bits of hardware, making lights flash and reading steering wheels. So a lot of that we can focus on correctly and get them pointing in the right direction for arcade.
So moving on from the 90s to what is probably one of the newest job roles for the industry as the industry has grown, and digital community manager, which is a good segue to you, Alex, at Ubisoft. And what's the reason why have Ubisoft been so inspired to take on apprentices and a new standard and be involved in the development of a new standard?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, hello everyone. I'm Alex. I manage the community management team based in Newcastle, a team of 40 people strong, to manage the catalog of Ubisoft. If you're not familiar with Ubisoft, we're one of the bigger publishers of the Western world for video games. Brands like Rainbow Six, Assassin's Creed, Ghost Recon, Watch Dogs, etc., etc. So we manage all of our brands across all of the EMEA languages even. So quite a big team that needs to look after these. And so we have, been involved with this in a case of, there is not really a formalized or, a specific, formal education today that you can point to say, okay, this is, you want to become a community manager, you want to work in that field, go and do this, and then, come and join us at Ubisoft as an example, right? That doesn't exist today. So we have various different backgrounds, quite commonly it's digital marketing or, social sciences, and that fits quite well. But it is more of a transferable skill today, rather than saying like, okay, this is the kind of thing that would really help to move into community management and the digital world in that regard. So that's why we've been very excited to be part of this and say, okay, let's build this, let's have this standard and work together and see what makes sense.
And I think that's a really key thing, isn't it? It's about taking part in actually developing a standard. And at the moment, there's games industry, I hate to say this, but it's been slightly behind a lot of other parts of creative industries in embracing the whole apprenticeships model and being involved in that. I think traditionally, talent has come from university. And I think when you're really busy doing a job, it's actually sometimes a job to take yourself out of that and actually think about what can we do to take part in something new. So it's two things there. It's really great to hear that, I say, a small company and a large company are both thinking, actually, this is something new, and we can and we should embrace this. And I think you started to hint now, Alex, about how this is sort of professionalizing that role. Marcia, you might want to say something about that, because something we've talked about, isn't it, about how these things, apprenticeships are actually professionalizing a specific job role.
Absolutely, and that's the thing we found with the digital community manager, which it was a really good one to do, because it's a brand new job role. We worked really closely with Alex and community managers and the games industry to focus on what employers need from people coming into this role, but more importantly, setting really, really high standards. So, and again, we work closely with the University of Sunderland and Alistair. So to get the employers and education together at such an early stage of an apprenticeship was amazing, and so that you could actually, as Alex said, make sure that it's a huge advantage to the employer, but also advantage to the apprentice as well coming in, so they have something of value and something that will help their career progression. Plus, employers know what this young person coming into their industry has learned at the end of the apprenticeship.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way of sort of bringing in our two providers into this conversation about the importance of the provider involvement in that whole process, and perhaps even introducing the idea of apprenticeships to industry in the first place. And James, I think from Creative Alliance, and do tell us a bit about how you work. I think that the impetus came from you, did it, as much as from you, Mark, in that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth me just sort of introducing who we are and that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm James Ellis. I work for Creative Alliance. So Creative Alliance is a social enterprise, but a training provider that specialises in creative digital marketing apprenticeships. So our big thing is to really work closely with all of our employers to help develop kind of the right workplace for apprenticeships. We've been working with the creative industries for about 15 years. So working initially with cultural, and now we work with a lot of marketing agencies and creative agencies. I was really surprised when Karen said that the games industry had only sort of been engaged with it for a couple of years. So, and what Karen was alluding to was late 2019, sort of about September time, we were looking at the software developer apprenticeship standard, which is a level 4. It's not something that we'd looked, it was sort of bordering on kind of moving into the IT sort of side of sector, whereas we'd stayed primarily in the creative side, but we were doing digital marketing. The new digital marketing standard has principles of coding embedded into it, and so we were realizing that the market was moving that way, and that we needed to do that. So we were looking at this standard, and but we didn't have the sort of training experience in-house. You know, my background is digital marketing, so we just didn't have that. So we brought in some trainers, and one of the things that I really wanted to do was bring in employers and actually build the training program up with them directly involved from sort of day one. And we wanted a good across the board. So Mark, who we'd worked with, who had an apprentice through us, more on the graphic design side of things. Interrupt me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but I'm pretty sure it was sort of more on the graphic and creative side, which we did, which was fine. I sort of contacted Mark. We also brought in a couple of web designers who were looking at the development side. So the software developer apprenticeship is, well, as it says on the tin, it's about developing software, and it's quite a flexible standard that can be looked at from the coding side for developing software for games and things like that, but also for, you know, websites. You know, there's lots of languages that you can potentially learn on the coding side. So anyway, we wanted to work with employers, so we put together, or I put together a 6-week, or maybe it was a bit longer than that actually, Mark, because Christmas kind of hit us, but it's about 8 or 9 week program where we would write part of the training program. And so we brought in talent for that. We'd write it. We'd bring in our expert employers. They would tell us it's rubbish, change it, manipulate it, and make sure that it was right for the industry. Then we would go back and do the next bit, write it, come back, told that it wasn't quite right, change, until by the end of it, we'd gone through the whole standard, every part of it, including all the vendor qualifications, including how we deliver the projects, and all of that was right for the industry and sort of tailored for what would work for Mark and for web designers. So we wanted something that wasn't off the peg, you know, this is your training program, work with that. It was something that could be flexible, and that's sort of something that goes along with all our values for all of our apprenticeship programs, is we try and tailor it to the employers, because we think that if we can get it right for the workplace, then it's going to be right for the talent coming in.
I think that it's absolutely key, isn't it, that these the standards when they're written have generic knowledge, skills and behaviours for a job role, and a way of assessing. And Marcia will perhaps tell us a bit about how assessment was designed for digital community manager in a minute. But I think that the thing is that regardless of that, it still needs to be context specific for an employer. It has to work for you as the employer, or you won't have any belief or faith in it, and it won't actually benefit your company, which is what we want all this to do. Although it's a requirement that across the standard, every apprentice must meet the knowledge, skills and behaviours for that whole of the standard in case they don't stay with you, or they want to move on. It's nevertheless important to pick out what's important. And so where there's an opportunity, where there isn't an opportunity perhaps in the workplace, it's that training provider's role to fill in that gap, so that the apprentice is focused on their job, where they are, but they also have that breadth of learning that is the whole of the standard as well. And Alistair, I mean, you've been acutely aware of that, I think, as you've been developing this with Ubisoft, to make sure that happens, and how you're going to work that. It'd be quite interesting to hear from you, perhaps, when you tell us a bit about how the university is embracing apprenticeships, how you're making that 20% off the job work. What have you had to think about?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, folks, and good morning. My name's Alistair. I'm Dean of the Faculty of Technology at the University of Sunderland, where I'm a professor in computer science for my sins. My interests are in cybersecurity and digital forensics, so quite how that maps into digital community management, we'll just see how that works out. We've been engaged with apprenticeships at the university for quite some time, particularly degree apprenticeships, the level 6 programs. And my School of Computer Science was the first in the university to write a degree apprentice in digital and technology solutions, which is a name that has been created by a committee and means nothing to anybody. So it confuses our employers somewhat. But that's been running for over 6 years now. We've had over 150 apprentices, degree apprentices through the scheme. Really interesting for us, and I go back to our first cohort where I had 100% success rate over 4 years now. Normally in computing programs, attrition's quite harsh, and we lose a lot in the first year. But 15 students started their first program and 15 finished. It was amazing that in degree level, 9 of the 15 got firsts. Which is pretty amazing in terms of our ratio. So it's fantastic. So we really buy into degree apprenticeships. Over the last 3 years, we've introduced a number of engineering degree apprenticeships, which is fantastic. And I don't know if you know the northeast of England, but manufacturing and advanced manufacturing are real key for our economy up here. And you know, people like Nissan, Caterpillar, all sorts of different employers involved with that, which is fantastic. An interesting difference between the two in that with the computing ones, we went with fewer employers and big numbers, and that basically was easier to manage, if I'm perfectly honest. But with engineering, it's been ones and twos across a broad range of employers, so we're getting a little bit more confident about what we're doing. I'll come on to digital community management just in a second, but the other program that we are starting this year is a level 7 master's apprentice, which is starting to get a little bit strange with the terminology, but that's really aimed at people who are in the workplace, and that's been interesting doing that. So digital community management, it's been a fascinating journey, and it's been great working with Marcia and Alex and colleagues at Ubisoft in particular, because we've kind of co-created the program, and it's been fantastic looking at the standard, looking at how we implement the standard and put it into a set of learning opportunities. So the program is split into 4 blocks. causing all sorts of consternation in my university because those blocks themselves aren't assessed, and it's just an endpoint assessment, which has been quite different to the degree apprentice programs that we've run. So there's a session starting at the end of this month on digital community management, and it's been really interesting looking at how we're going to do that and pull all the various strands together. Whilst it's going to be housed in my School of Computer Science, I'm drawing on expertise across the university, from the business school, from our journalism school, and people that run programs in social media. So there's a breadth of expertise being fed into this program, and as well as computer science. And there's not actually a lot of computer science in the program, but quite a bit of data science, so and we go into data analytics and the like. So and that's been teased out as we've gone through that co-creation process. And one of the, I mean, it's been great talking to the students, the participants, delegates, call them what you will, apprentices that have coming onto the program, and the level of enthusiasm has been fantastic, and you know, they can't wait to get started. It's tremendous. The really interesting thing for me is the way that Ubisoft have engaged, and we've got a whole series of case studies that we're going to work through and do that marriage of theory and practice, which leads into the question I started to answer about an hour ago, is Karen's point about how we manage this 20% off the job training. Now with the degree apprentice program, it was relatively straightforward. We had 60 credits that we ran each semester, and that kind of equated into a day. So we did a day a week, we hit people out of the workplace and stuck them in the university. Great. With this program, it's slightly different in the pattern that we've got. One is that the modules, the blocks are 0 credit rated, so that doesn't fit into like a standard university concept of a module, but we're looking at taking a day a week away from the workplace. That's how we're going to get that 20%. Now, quite what that day looks like in terms of the student engagement, they certainly don't want to listen to me rabbit on for 7.5 hours. I'm quite happy to rabbit on for 7.5 hours, but I suspect they won't be. So we're just planning that whole learning environment with a whole series of case studies, a whole series of discussions, a whole series of presentations, a whole series of investigations around the space. Because that is a real issue for us in this program, because of the way that it's been designed over 2 years. It doesn't quite add up, that 20% off the job as against what you would expect in terms of a notional student workload for the size of the program. So we're being, I hate being bureaucratic, but almost overly bureaucratic about ensuring that 20% is going to be there, because as you all know, and you know much better than I, when we get audited, there's an expectation that we document that, and we've got the backup to show that trail's there. So it's going to be a really interesting challenge. A lot of it will be around practice. A lot of it will be bringing people in from industry. So the people that I don't know in this session, I'll be contacting you to come in and you know, talk about your environment as we look at the motivation for the participants, the apprentices, and they all are doing a job at the minute. They all love their job, but they all see this as a real opportunity to enhance their careers, but also to enhance the work that they're doing for the organisation.
Just flipping back to Mark and to James and that 20% off the job, how is that working for you? Is that in a similar way?
No, so we do what's called a blended approach. So every learner has a one-to-one development coach who, well, I'm going to talk pre-COVID because it has changed somewhat sort of during COVID, but basically every learner has a one-to-one development coach who would come to visit the learner in the workplace and work with them directly. And we have always been project based, which is one of the things that we worked with Mark, which was what would the projects be that would be most relevant to you guys. And so we set up projects, the development coaches, all of whom have industry professionalism. Like I said, my background's in digital marketing. So I work with the digital marketers, but we develop the projects with them. We work with the employers to make sure that those projects are relevant. Like, for instance, one of the things that we talked to initially pitched was about how to plan for a piece of software or being part of a piece of software, which we were told probably isn't right, because you can't plan for something if you've never actually had a go at building something. So our first project was actually to build a piece of software and sort of make all the mistakes as part of the training, and the development coach works through them over time. So they get given time in the workplace to help develop that project while working with the development coach as well. And then we also have classroom-based work. So this is the blended approach. So a bit like what Alistair was saying in Sunderland, was we would have online sessions once or twice a month, especially with a software developer, because there are, just trying to remember, 2 vendor qualifications that they have to complete. They have to complete a Microsoft Technical Associate Certificate in a language. I think we're going for PHP and Java and CSS. And they also have to complete Principles of Coding and something else as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, so we do blended. So we do classroom and work-based training, which the training provider sort of facilitates with a one-to-one development coach. So a little bit different. Something
you've hinted at there, James, which we have a saying at AIM Assessment that there's nothing standard about apprenticeship standards,
No.
i.e. they are all very different, not least because of their assessment methods, which is really important, because they say these are now assessed right at the end, and it's absolutely essential that that's spot on, because what we don't want is for employers to have had a great experience an apprentice come to the end and they've failed because the assessment is inappropriate in some way. Marcia, do you just want to talk a little bit about the assessment methodology for Digital Community Manager and how you arrived at that?
Absolutely, and I even remembered to unmute myself, which is amazing. Again, we were really lucky with the Digital Community Manager, because we had such good support from industry, Ubisoft, Rebellion, All Up Digital, and there was a real commitment to make sure that this apprenticeship standard was right for industry and for the apprentice. So with the assessment, there's 2 parts to an apprenticeship when you're actually developing one. So one is setting out all the knowledge, skills and behaviours that you want an apprentice to have at the end, which is something that we can all talk about from experience, and Alex knows what it takes to make a really good community manager. But within the assessment, it was almost like a new idea for us, and we were like, oh, we don't know how to assess. But actually it was a lot less complicated than we thought, and we had really good support from the Institute of Apprenticeships, I have to say, from our relationship manager. But we took it back to one simple question, which is, how would an employer assess a community manager as they were going through their kind of training period, as they were going through the start of their career? What would you be looking for from an apprentice? So you have to have 2 methods of assessment. So we landed on a scenario-based assessment whereby a community manager or employed by the assessment organisation would write a small scenario that would typically happen to a community manager in their day-to-day. And then the community manager being assessed, the apprentice, would then have to write a short piece about how they would react to it and how they would work out the issues set up in their scenario. So that was number 1. So it's quite work-based, it's practical. The apprentice is going to be sat at a computer. There will be a situation they have to react to, and then they will be assessed on how they did that. And the second part is to have a professional interview. So everything that can't be assessed practically which is a lot of things like the behaviours will be assessed in an interview. So, which is backed up by a portfolio. Unfortunately, unlike industry, you can't have a portfolio as part of your assessment, but you can, the apprentice can build up a body of work which they take into an interview to show what they've learned over the year to 2 years.
I'd like to come in a minute to talk about actually how the process of actually taking on an apprentice, but just linking what you've just said, there's a couple of questions in the Discord. Does the panel think it'll become easier to design and establish new apprenticeships in the future? The process seems very bureaucratic and complex, and I think you'll agree, Marcia, it's getting easier.
I would say so. I think Jake Hadgood from Sumo will be talking a little bit later, and he's made really rapid progress with the level 7 game programming apprenticeship. And I think we were caught very early as things started to change in apprenticeship development. So I think now the business relationship managers at the Institute for Apprenticeship have a much better idea of what they're trying to achieve. The process is a lot simpler, and it should be a lot quicker as well. So yes, I'm going to give you a really big, enthusiastic, but yet cautious yes to that.
Which usually leads on to a fantastic second question about, are there some other games development professions, apprenticeships in design? And if not, is there a plan with industry education providers to get these going? I would say over to you, guys and girls, because these need to be industry led. So if you think that you want an apprenticeship in a particular aspect of games design, art, program, whatever, contact somebody like Marcia, who's dead in the middle, and she can advise about how to go about thinking, because it'd be really great to get some more. We did have a QA technician on the go, but it sort of fell apart because it was quite challenging at the time, I think, and it wasn't the best time to develop an apprenticeship. But as Marcia says, it certainly is now. There's a will there, and there's some extra money there. So yeah, please, let's go for it. We've got very few minutes left, but I think it's really important if you could just James and Alistair and Mark and Alex just talk just for a little bit about actually the process of finding an apprentice. How did you find your apprentices, and what are you looking for in an apprentice? Mark, let's go with Mark. What were you looking for?
Oh, yeah, I'll jump in on that one.
Or did James just suggest someone?
We work very closely. Well, before we started any recruitment process, we spent a long time talking to James, just trying to build a profile of the right kind of candidate that we were looking for. And because it's an apprenticeship, we're looking for the right type of person rather than obviously an established kind of qualification base. So we put that profile together over a couple of weeks, and James and the guys at Creative Alliance did a fantastic job of collating I think probably about a dozen or so prime candidates for us to bring to interview. And I must say that the standard was fantastic. We had a really difficult time choosing, and our choice was really based more on personalities of the apprentices involved, and also the kind of self-motivation bits. What have they done on their own in the bit that they're looking at that they want to get into? It was those guys and girls that had gone off and done stuff on their own and got stuff up and running. So that ability to bring things into an interview, like a portfolio or some links to game software or downloads of stuff that they'd done outside of this was fantastic. And that's what we based our selection criteria on and choosing our apprentice. Was that enthusiasm and willingness to learn. James, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I also notice Alex is nodding in great agreement there. And your apprentices are already employed with you, aren't they? They're
correct,
already staff. So this is something that some of the larger organisations are using the apprenticeship levy money to actually upskill existing staff. So
correct. So we have a secondary department in the office, and quite a few of them have a motivation to move into community. So the apprenticeship becomes part of their development program, effectively, of developing the skills from within the company for the, the next level of the company. So that's really exciting and handy. And what I'm not very much in agreement there is the idea of, looking for aptitude and the right, mindset. Because, skill wise, the vast majority of skills we will be able to train. And, as part of the apprenticeship, the vast majority of skills we will be training, right? And it's brilliant. But for the person that we want to bring into the team and, to have with us, is that's a personality question. And that's really, an attitude question as well. So that's why I'm not very much in agreement with Mark. There's we want to have the right mindset person that, understands this and wants to learn and wants to bring something forward and, drive us to not where we are today, but where we need to be in 2 years' time from now, and topics like that. So that's the really exciting part, yeah.
And that's the point, really, isn't it? What apprenticeships, going back to, we started the discussion with what can they do for your business, and certainly in something that Ian was saying in the last session about needing to be innovative more than ever. Now, this might well be a way that this might be a good solution. If you've got the right apprentices. It just depends on, certainly on that balance of, there's a lot of stakeholders involved with this. So in addition to the apprentice, there is the employer and the provider, and it's really important to have that education and industry mix, which is what I was talking about. We were saying a lack of engagement with industry and education. This is a fantastic way, I think, of bringing those things together, really. We've got a few minutes left. Any sort of last comments that people would wish to make about any of that?
I think I wouldn't mind sort of saying about the talent that could be potentially missed for the games industry in regards to only looking at graduates. It's as Mark said, we've found sort of about a dozen prime candidates, and bearing in mind they're not allowed to have sort of degrees or any training that actually clashes with the course that they are doing. So they had to be people who often are very passionate. They're sort of the doers that, the formal education doesn't necessarily, for one reason or another, work for them, or they might have gone down the wrong pathway initially, life gone and done an English degree, not that that's the wrong pathway, and then found that they have a passion for software development and they've done it on their own. This isn't, and quite often what they need is a little bit of honing. As Mark said, often their coding can be a little bit rough, their software development, because they've taught themselves. But this is the people that every industry needs, the ones that wake up every day and they want to kind of create these things, make these things, and those are the people that often end up going on to apprenticeships, because they want to learn while doing, and that's the type of learners that they are. They are doing people, and I think if the sector or the industry doesn't sort of take on this and look on there, that they could be missing out, particularly as there is a growing skills gap. So it needs to be addressed. Yeah.
We've just had the results of our polls, actually, which is quite interesting. So from an employer's perspective, people who are embracing apprenticeships and seeing them as an important element in growth and new talent, 67%. So that's great. 6 out of 9, that's good. And people are starting to consider, there's 1 person out of 9 is considering, do it. find a dream and do it. But it's great that people are thinking about that as an option. And still some people don't understand how apprenticeships work. So I think that's gives us a signal, doesn't it, that there's still quite a lot for us to do in whatever part of the industry we're in to flag the benefits of them. Of our training providers, some people are already working with employers to support the delivery. Some are only offering degrees or FE qualifications, and again, a fair share of that of people don't really understand how these apprenticeships work. So I think that's offering us lots of work still to be done, and I think, as we said, if we can have some more standards and more people to be involved, I think would be absolutely great for the industry. And let's see this time next year what we have to talk about then. But I'm so grateful to you all. I think from my perspective, it's been a great session. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. Fantastic employers ready to go in, and great support from providers. And Marcia, do just keep that middle ground going.
Will do.
Rick, back to you.
Thank you very much, Karen and Marcia, and all the panel for a really interesting session under the bonnet of apprenticeships. Thank you. So we're going to go now to another screen break for 10 minutes. And I'm just going to show you what is coming up next, which is a keynote from Emma Smith, Head of Talent at Creative Assembly, who's been running one of the most ambitious and far-reaching crossovers between industry and education, and I think you'll be fascinated to hear what she has to say. After that, by the way, we will go straight into 2 different tracks, which I'll tell you about at the end of that keynote. So thank you again to our panelists and moderators, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you all very much.